That's how the story ended. The Lantern King vanished without a trace, and we never heard from him again. Nyrissa helped return the kingdom to Galarian and followed her beloved there. After celebrating the victory with great fanfare, everyone began work on restoration efforts. Nyrissa helped the king in every way possible, and she quickly came to be loved across the country. No one would have thought that this kind nymph was a former villain, so recently guilty of causing all those afflictions. The kingdom built by our hero became an example for all its neighbors. What else would you expect? The stolen lands became the only place where the citizens sincerely toast the health of their ruler. The citizens lived trouble-free, and taxes made it to the treasury without losses. A powerful army guards the peace. Exploration of magic is on par. The temples are flooded with their congregations. And, most importantly, our cultural contributions are at least the equal of Absalom. Just half a year after the war with the First World, Galt moved its troops to the southern border of the kingdom. Their attack was rebuffed. The enemy state's infantry could do little against soldiers who were skilled with their swords and knew the military arts better than the alphabet. Since then, Galt hasn't risked crossing any borders again, fearing cruel retaliation for further insolence. Who'd have thought that some tiny barony founded in the Stolen Lands by an adventurer would become a real kingdom, playing a prominent part in world politics? Of course, not everyone likes the proactive stance of this young, bold state, but the fact of the matter is, they can't afford to ignore the king and his diplomats. The king thought it best to limit the use of magic by regular citizens. That decision, oft criticized by prominent minds in Brevoy, more than once proved to be the right one in the end. The kingdom is reliably protected from any magical incidents that might be caused by unskilled wizards or nefarious infiltrators. The king became a true patron of fine crafts. Over time, the castle treasury filled with wonderful gifts from the best masters in the area. Armor, weapons, even magical artifacts, and the collection is still growing. The feud between Brevoy's north and south, which had been smoldering for ages, never sparked the fires of civil war. Through great effort, our king managed to bring both parties to the negotiating table. While Rostland didn't gain its independence, it did receive wide autonomy rights. Our relationships with both House Sertova and the Sword Lords are respectful, but they've become lukewarm. Because of us, neither side got everything they wanted. Casil Aldori settled in our capital, though he left politics to teach dueling. Amiri didn't remain leader of the Tiger Lords for long. Ruling was certainly not her calling. The years she spent with them were enough for them to regain their forces, though, and they recovered to be one of the best mercenary armies in the region again. They revere her as a great hero, even more than they once worshipped Armagh. And they respect our king, of course. He was a comrade in arms of the great Amiri, after all. Their tribe came to be loyal allies. Pitax almost returned to its former state. A joyful city filled with beers of dubious quality and deals of questionable legality. The old trade houses lost the crown, but they retrieved the property Iravetti had taken from them. Soon, Pitax became almost like a second capital in the kingdom, a thriving city through which rivers of money from across the region ran. Unfortunately, we get much less of this money than we would like. Governor Liachenza turned out to be helpless against widespread embezzlement. Self-administration turned the Academy of the Arts into a strange place. The court sycophants were quickly ousted. It turned out they weren't welcome when there wasn't someone like Iravetti constantly ordering odes to themselves. In their place came a motley, unpredictable crowd. Eccentrics, fashionable authors of popular prints and cheap novels, charlatans, scribblers with delusions of grandeur, as many as 3 feuding experimental theaters, and even a few truly unappreciated geniuses. The Academy is not only highly esteemed, there's no place like it, even in Absalom. Tartuk, who never succeeded in restoring his gnome appearance, seems to have completely forgotten about who he once was. It no longer bothers him, for now the Purple Kobold has become a real king to his tribe. Keeping his word to the king, Tartuk and his subjects behave themselves, living peacefully with the citizens of nearby settlements. Some of the reptiles even manage to find work digging wells and dungeons in people's settlements, for a small fee, of course. After enduring so many storms and troubles, Varnhold eventually turned into a real city. Daring settlers decided to conquer the vast, wild expanses of Dunsword, and despite all odds, they succeeded. The modest colony that almost vanished at the hands of an ancient lich turned everything around to become a thriving city with lively river trading. Peace reigns in the caves beneath the old sycamore. The kobolds and mites continue to explore the depths and learn simple crafts from each other. Rumor has it, the first mite-kobold wedding even happened not long ago. That said, settlers still aren't rushing to build new homes in the area. Some kind souls even put up warning signs along the roads. Beware, traveler. Steer clear of the old sycamore. Another inscription soon appeared over the sign though. No keep-going treasure ahead honest. Oleg's trading post continues to thrive, attracting even more travelers. Much to its owner's displeasure, a small town is springing up around it. Despite Oleg's grumbling, he and his wife are well regarded by everyone, and Svetlana was even elected town chief. Making sure her sister was safe, the former bandit Kressel traveled south. Her trail went cold somewhere in Absalom's docks. They say she changed her name again and now serves on a trade ship, hiding from old acquaintances. Jod and Keston, after surviving the bloom, remained loyal to the king they followed through thick and thin, and they continue to serve as court advisors to this day. The austere priest and the gloomy warrior regularly argue over the proper way to govern the state, as well as which of the two rulers should hear out first. Some things never change. Keston Garas took a post as chief of the kingdom's guard. The former heir to a noble family never returned to Brevoy, severing all ties to his kin. However, a few years after the victory over the First World, a girl arrived from Brevoy and soon married Keston. They say Keston started smiling a lot more after that. Jod remained loyal to the king to the end of his days, healing the sick and generously sharing his austere wisdom with anyone who wished to hear it, and some who didn't. Having fulfilled his duty to the ruler, Erastil's priest peacefully departed this world, surrounded by friends and disciples. Breinhardt became a loyal ally and trade partner of the kingdom, and Darvin himself had been seen as a frequent guest in the capital. The elegant monarch of the neighboring kingdom has broken many hearts at court. After his visits, many young guards and servants have been seen staring through windows, sighing wistfully about something. The Fae took a fancy to the kingdom, feeling totally at home here. They often play various pranks, but they never do any serious harm. Falcos and Teresia managed to restore the magic forest. Once freed of the anger of the Scythe Tree, people returned to the abandoned village, and it became a haven of friendship between the Fae and ordinary people, just like old times. The lizard folk of the Longtail tribe returned to live on the shores of Candlemere, but they couldn't return to their ancient way of life. Living alongside people, the lizard folk adopted their behaviors, habits, and even religion. More and more of the Longtail tribe pray not to the spirits of their ancestors, but to Erastil or Gorum. They even began to forget their original language. I hope someone writes down their songs and legends before they all sink into oblivion. A delegation of wizards from Absalom and other areas appeared in the kingdom one day, asking for permission to examine the lair of the Lich Farneris the Thoughtful. After completing their research, the wizards spent a long time thanking the king for freeing the world of that monster. In their opinion, he'd been capable of causing the end of the world, maybe even 2 worlds. The sweet teeth departed on a journey, hoping to see as many wonders as possible of this world and others. They keep sending us news from every corner of the map. Their bright painted wagon, drawn by a bull mastodon, crisscrosses Galarian, somehow appearing in the center of one incredible story after another. Evindra settled down in the Tuskwater and visits the capital often. She became a friend to the people of the kingdom, helping them and teaching them how to treat the lake life with care. Parents allow their children to swim in the Tuskwater at any time, day or night, secure in the knowledge that she'll look out for them. After Nyrissa's curse was lifted, the maimed face of the last defaced sister began healing, little by little. She still keeps her distance from people, but she's always glad to see the king. After the victory over the Lantern King, the storyteller abandoned his affairs and began spending a lot of time alone in contemplation. He eventually bid farewell to the king and left his lands. But I suspect the inhabitants of Galarian haven't heard the last of this mysterious traveler, for his own story is hardly finished. The ancient artifacts gathered by the king built the foundation of a museum collection that has become famous even in far-off Absalom. Amiri remained a pariah to her native tribe, but she stayed close friends with Nylak, who ruled the Six Bears wisely and taught them to survive in the unfamiliar plains and cities. The restless barbarian would often travel for long stretches of time, but sooner or later she would always return to her old friends, bragging about new scars and recounting new feats, many of which Nylak immortalized in song. The Tiger Lords revered Amiri as a great hero, but she didn't stay chieftain for long. After all, she was much better at crushing skulls than giving orders. Valerie stayed to serve the king, and to this day she continues to be a muse to many people. Not just bards and admirers, but to warriors as well. Honest and resilient, Valerie is not just famous for her feats in battle, but also for her patience and kindness, which she says the king helped her discover within herself. Harren became famous, respected by dwarves throughout our kingdom as well as our neighbors, even as far as the 5 Kings Mountains. He's often been asked to help out or teach others, and he's never denied anyone, despite his grumbling. Some people even listen to his preaching. Lucky for us, there's a lot less howling about the end of the world now, and more wise words of moderation and humility. Not all of his disciples turned to Grotus, but everyone took away something useful from his teachings. Jaethal spent some time at the king's court, but she then left to do whatever it was her new goddess required. She must have become a great inquisitor for Pharasma, as no one would know the ways of the undead and Urgathoa's cultists as well as a former undead cultist would. She was also seen in the company of Salim Godafar. It's unlikely the two became friends, being so different from one another, but it's a known fact that they worked together. Octavia didn't stay still for very long. Soon, she and Reg went to Numeria and started a huge slave rebellion there. They didn't manage to destroy the Technic League, but to this day, slaves speak their names with admiration, and slavers with terror. Over the course of their journey, the two grew as close as ever, leaving their quarrels and resentments behind. After returning from Numeria, Octavia settled in her mother's house and became the king's advisor and loyal companion. Rigangar left for Numeria with Octavia to start a slave rebellion. Over the journey, he really matured and learned to understand others, as well as how to control his anger. After he returned, he took a position in the king's court. Being both formidable and charming, he inspired fear in the hearts of some and lust in others. There are even some rumors that he almost talked Octavia into marrying him, and possibly even continuing the Della Fiorni line. Tristan stayed in the Stolen Lands. Endowed with a special blessing of Sarenrae, the priest became known as a great healer and went on to perform many more miracles. I'd say the Movonic Diva deserves the right to rejoin Sarenrae's divine army. I hope the goddess will think the same when Tristan's hour comes and his soul is up for a new judgment. After the war ended, Ekin hung up his bow on the wall and traded the path of the ranger in for the craft of the carpenter. It may not be the most heroic ending to a tragic story like his, but as Torag is my witness, Ekin's happy with it, as is Alina, who became his wife and is bearing his child. Any baby born into this family will be pretty lucky, since the king himself still visits his old friend and will likely become the child's patron. Jubilost returned to the life of a traveling explorer, frequently visiting his favorite kingdom. He said so himself. His famous work studying the First World all opened with a dedication to his longtime companion, the king. Another name was also mentioned, 2Z, my guide and inspiration. Admirers would ask Jubilost many times about this mystery lady, but he would only chuckle, hitch his knapsack on his shoulder, and return to storm the vast expanses of the First World once again. As for Knock Knock, apologies, I mean Hero Knock Knock, he continued his questionably heroic efforts in the Stolen Lands. Despite whatever mess he fell into, no matter the danger he leapt into, he always seemed to scrape through just a little better off than before. Like true heroes, he simply never gave up, struggling on and meeting the challenge of each new day with a spirit that no mishap or misfortune could ever quell. The slightly inaccurate statue of him and the king still stands in the square to this day. The two figures side by side. I've always felt that, while the heights may be a bit off, let's say, it accurately reflects the size and spirit of the goblin hero who'd been nurtured by the teachings of his king. Kalika remained in the kingdom, though her desire to witness the world's wonders keeps driving her to take long journeys. But when she is home, she spends much of her spare time with her sister. They don't quarrel anymore, and have stopped dragging each other into trouble. Kanera settled down in the capital and became a very busy entrepreneur. It seems as though every hour is planned, meeting with rich merchants or inventors whose work she's promoting. But on her way home, she never fails to stop at the market to personally buy some sweets for her sister. Between Kanera's business sense and Kalika's charm, they founded and successfully run not one, but 3 organizations. A trading house, a shelter for tiefling children, and a school of magic devoted to Nethys. Nyrissa and her beloved king live happily together, setting up the kingdom hand in hand. Their union somehow linked the unruliness of the First World with the order of material plane. Nyrissa managed to bring forth the daring vision for which she had once been cursed, the creation of her dream country. Our kingdom is now a flourishing land, taking the best of both wild nature and structured civilization, and our capital is an amazing garden city, which visitors from all over Golarion come to see. As for myself, the author of this book, Lindsay, who never chose a pretty nickname, I'm still here, inside my creation within the Capital Library. I live just like I always dreamed, surrounded by people and books, and not a day goes by without someone turning my pages. My story inspired many others to take up the quill. My readers have written many fierce books, articles, and pamphlets, flinging truth in the faces of tyrants. What more could I dream of? I hope, oh honored reader, that this story offered you some daring ideas, or at least some entertainment. In any case, it's time to set the final period.